Okay, so moving on to question 9. We've got everything right so far, so our grade C is in the bag, and we're now moving on looking for our B grade. So this is the question where you gain extra marks for the way that you lay out your work and communicate what you're doing. So in the diagram below, ABCD is a rectangle. So ABCD is that large rectangle. PQ is parallel to AD. Those are parallel, which means that we've got two smaller rectangles inside the large one. The area of ABCD is 52 square centimeters. So the whole shape has got an area of 52. APQD has got an area of 20. Calculate the values of F and G. Okay, so I know that the area of APQD is 20. So the area of that one is 20. And I know the area of the whole shape is 52. So that bit there is going to be the difference between 52 and 20, which is going to give me 32. So let's write that down because that's probably going to be useful. So the area of, and let's call this PBCQ, is 52, take away 20, which is 32, and the units for area, centimeters squared. Now I know that to find an area of a rectangle, I multiply its length by its breadth. So the area of PBCQ is 8 times F, and I know that that is 32. Length times width is the area, and the area is 32. Solving that equation, to get the F on its own, I've got to break the times 8 by doing the opposite of times by 8, which is dividing by 8. 32 divided by 8 is 4. So F is 4. So once that I know that F is 4, I also know, because this is a rectangle, PQ is going to be the same length as BC, which is 4 centimeters. So now in APQD, four times G is the area of that one, and that's equal to 20. So G is 20 divided by 4, which is 5 centimeters. So put circles around those to show clearly that we've worked out what F and G is, or we could write down there. So therefore F is 4 and G is 5. It doesn't matter. It's not the common mistake to make here is that students think they have to write a story. It's not anything to do with writing a story. It's how you lay out and make clear what you've done. So it's clear there I'm working with an area and how I found it, and then here I'm working with lengths and then an area again. So for that question 9, there's 1 mark for finding the 32. There's a method mark for then saying, well, that means 8 times F is 32. And a mark for 4. Then there's another mark for method mark for 4 times g is 20, and a second one for correctly getting it is 5, and then plus the extra 2 for how you're laying out your work. Question 10. Kerry has a set of cards. Each of her cards is labelled north, east, south or west. Kerry chooses one card at random from her set of cards. Complete the table below to find the probability of Kerry choosing a card labelled west. Well, because that table is going to show all the possible outcomes, it can either be north or east or south or west, then those probabilities must add up to 1. So in order for those to add up to 1, we've already got there 0.4, 0.6, 0.85. So we're going to do 1 less 0.85. Well, if you think that that's like £1 less 85 pence, 15 pence, which we would write as 0.15. So that is 0.15. Kerry chooses one card at random from her set of cards. What is the probability that the card is labelled east or south? Well, if it's east or, if you're using the word or in probability, it basically tells you to add their probabilities together. So east or south is going to be 0.25 plus 0.2, which is the same as 25 pence plus 20 pence, 45 pence. Sasha has an identical set of cards. Kerry and Sasha each choose one card at random from their set of cards. What is the probability that they both choose a card labelled north? Well, that means north and north. Kerry's got north and Sasha's got north. And in probability, the word and means multiply. So if in order for them both to get north, that's going to mean 0.4 multiplied by 0.4. 4 fours is 16, and there are 2 digits after the decimal point initially, so there'll be 2 digits after the decimal point when they're multiplied, so 0.16. Okay, so marks for that. 1 mark for correctly subtracting what you know from 1. 1 mark for the correct answer. 1 mark for adding the right probabilities. 1 mark for the answer. 1 mark for multiplying the correct probabilities. 1 mark for the answer. Question 11. Okay, so we need to work out a missing coordinate for the function, the expression that we're going to plot on that graph. Now, what I always suggest in class when I teach this is that if you're not confident what you're doing here, always start by choosing a value that you know the answer for to make sure you end up with the right thing. So let's use this to check that we're going to get the right answer here. So in this expression, y equals x squared minus 5x plus 2, I'm going to replace the x with a 2. Now when you're replacing the x with a 2, imagine that what you've got there with an x is actually, when you break it to put a number in there, you're breaking a pair of wrong facing brackets that are going to become right facing brackets. So the x squared is going to become 2 squared. Take away 5, I'm breaking that x up, 2 plus 2. 2 squared is 4. 5 2s are 10. Negative, positive, signs are different. answer is negative, plus 2. 4, take away 10, takes you down to minus 6, negative 6. Adding 2 takes you to negative 4. Okay, so I know that if I repeat that now with the number 3, I'm going to get the right answer. So 3 squared, take 5 lots of 3 plus 2. 3 squared is 9, 15, 2. 9, take away 15, takes you down to negative 14, plus 2 is negative 13. Hold on, what have I done wrong there? Sorry. It's negative 6. Sorry, 9 take away 15 is negative 6, plus 2, which is negative 4. So that value is negative 4 as well. Okay, now we're going to plot the points. So when x is negative 1, y is 8. So negative 1 is 8. And it's important when you plot these that you plot them clearly. So you don't put a little dot, make sure you mark an accurate cross. 0 is 2, 1 is negative 2, 2 is negative 4. We'll leave that for a moment. 4 is negative 2, and 5 is 2. A graph that is beginning with an x squared value is either going to look like a smiley graph or a sad graph. If it's positive, it's going to look smiley. And you can see there that those points are going to produce, when we join them up, that type of curve. So that looks good. Now, I ended up saying that that was going to be negative 11. Well, the first thing that made me think, hang on a minute, that can't be right, is my graph only goes down as far as negative 6. But let's say that I'd worked it out completely wrong and was to get an answer of 4 up there. Then that wouldn't fit in with the type of curve I'd be expecting to see. So you can pretty much work out whether you've worked that out wrongly or rightly by the curve of the graph. Now you can see that 3 is negative 4, fits in with that curve. When you join these up, you don't join them up with a ruler, you're supposed to join them freehand, and it's easier if you put your wrist on the inside of the curve, because your wrist forms a natural pivot to make that easier to draw. So you would use a pencil, which I'll probably regret not doing in a minute. So that's what they're looking for, a freehand curve. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to follow the flow of the points. Okay, get this part right and we've got our B. Draw the line y equals negative 3 on the graph paper. Write down the values of x where the line y equals negative 3 cuts the curve. So y equals negative 3 is where the y coordinate is always negative 3. So the y coordinate is here. So when that's always negative 3, is along that line there. So that's the line at every point on there, but y coordinate is negative 3. And what they're looking for is the x coordinate where those lines and curves intersect. So you've got one value there at 1.5 and one value here at 3.5. So marks for that. 1 mark for -4. 1 mark for plotting the points. And 1 mark for drawing the curve. So it's P for plotting the points, C for the curve. And then 2 marks for this. So 1 mark for drawing the line y equals -3, and 1 mark for writing down the correct coordinates of where they intersect. And because that's a freehand curve, if you got any of those points, 1.5, 1.4 or 1.6, 3.4, 3.6, then you would get the marks. They'd give you that tolerance. Right. Products of prime factors. We're into the B's. So if you haven't got everything right from now, any marks you can pick up from here on are going to boost your chances. So product of prime factors, you're going to repeatedly divide by prime numbers. So you're going to start, how many times does 2 go into that? 350. You can divide that by 2. And when you divide that by 2, you get 175. You can't divide that by 2, so you need to divide it by 5. When you divide that by 5, 5 goes into 17 3 times, remainder 2, so that's going to be 35. Divide that by 5 again, and you get 7. So there we go, all prime numbers. So 700 is 2 times 2 times 5 times 5 times 7. In index form, you've got 2 times 2, which is 2 squared. 5 times 5 is 5 squared. And just 7 to the power of 1 because it isn't being multiplied by anything. The number 33,554,432 is equal to 2 to the power of 25. Explain how this tells you that that number is not a square number. So when you were learning and practicing all about prime factors and products of prime factors, you would have discussed the fact for a square number, the powers will always be even. 25 is odd, so because it does not have a power or an index which is an even number. So it's not a square number because it does not have a power which is even. So 1 mark for the method of breaking down your number into prime factors. 1 mark for getting the prime factors, and 1 mark for writing it in index form, and 1 mark for that explanation. Okay, question 13 is all about equations of lines. If you haven't revised equations of lines, this isn't going to make any sense to you at all, so I suggest you go and do a bit of revision and come back to it. When you have an equation of a line, the number that's in front of the x tells you how steep the line is. If the x term is negative, then it means that the line is a downhill slope. If it's positive, it's an uphill slope. So which one of the following equations could represent the line shown in the graph above? Well, I know that that has got a negative gradient, negative slope, so it isn't going to be that one, it isn't going to be that one, but it might be that one, it might be that one, it might be that one. The other part of the equation of a line, which in general form, when we teach it, we write it like that: y equals mx plus c. That's the slope gradient. It's positive for an uphill slope, it's negative for a downhill slope. This is called the intercept on y-axis. It's where the line cuts the y-axis, the vertical axis. So you can see here the origin is here, so that's going to have a coordinate. So it isn't going to be that one, because that one's plus 0. So I've narrowed it down now to one of these. That one is a downhill line, but it's cutting the y-axis at -2, which would be down here. So it's not that one. This one is a negative line, downhill line, and it's crossing the y-axis at +2, which that would be. So that's the line that we're looking for. Which one of the following points lies on the line 2y equals 3x plus 4? So what we can do here is replace the x and y with these coordinate values and see which one balances it. So the x is always the first number, the y is always the second. Because everything is positive in there, it's not going to be these ones where we got a negative value and a positive value. So it's going to be one of these. So let's try this one. So 5, 2 would be 2, and instead of y, 2 equals 3, and instead of x, 2 2s are 4, 5 3s are 15, plus 4. So it's not that. Let's try 2, 5. So 2, y is 5, equals 3, x is 2, plus 4. 2 times 5 is 10, 6 plus 4. 10 does equal 6 plus 4, so the coordinate pair that is on that line is 2, 5. So we'll circle that. What is the gradient of the line shown in the graph above? Well, we can see it's an uphill graph, so it isn't going to be that one, or that one, because they're all downhill graphs. So it's either going to be 3 over 2 or 2 over 3. Again, when you will have been taught this, you will have been taught how to calculate that gradient. The gradient is the difference in the y coordinates over the difference in the x coordinates. Y diff, x diff. So m is diff y over diff x. So diff y is 2, diff x is 3. So it's an uphill graph, so it's positive, and it's 2 over 3. So like I said, if you haven't revised equations of lines, then none of that would have made sense. But it is something that if you do revise it, it does come quite quickly. And there's a limited amount of questions they can ask you on it. So 1 mark for that one, 1 mark for that one, 1 mark for that one. And we're at the B grade questions now. Question 14. A whole number is written on a card. You're given 3 clues to help you work out the number on the card. Clue 1. Double the number is between 8 and 18 inclusive. But if you double the number to get 8 and 18, the numbers are going to be half of those. So they're whole numbers, so we're going to be halving 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. So it's one of those numbers. The number is a prime number. That's not 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 a prime number. So it's either 5 or 7. The number is not a factor of 100. So 100, the number doesn't divide exactly into 100. Well, 5 does, leaving our number 7. So how are those 3 marks allocated? If you get it down to 5 or 6, sorry, 5 or 7, you would get 2 marks. If you got it 4, 6, 8 or 9, you would get 1 mark. Question 15. Now, I'll say here as well that again, if you haven't revised this topic on dimensions, this won't make any sense to you at all, so it's worth you going and practicing that and coming back. So in the following formula, each measurement of length is represented by a letter. Consider the dimensions implied by the formulae. Write down for each case whether the formula could be for a length, an area, a volume, or none of these. So when I'm teaching this, the first thing I would say is replace all the letters with the same measure of length. So each of these letters I'm going to replace with an L. So let's do the first one. So if I do d squared plus hw, they're all lengths, so that's the same as length squared plus length times length. L times L multiplied by the same thing is a length squared. So I've got the length squared plus the length squared is another length squared. And length squared, length times length, is area. So that one is an area. Next one, d plus w plus h. Well, they're all lengths. If you add 3 lengths together, you get another length. Just a longer one. So that formula is going to give you a length. Next one. Well, pi is just a number, so we can ignore the numbers. They don't add anything to it. So that's the same as a length minus a length squared. Well, a length minus length squared is area. Doesn't mean anything. You can't subtract. You can add areas to areas and subtract areas from areas, but you can't take an area off a length, so nothing. It's a nonsense formula. Next one, d plus h bracket w is length plus length times length. Well, length plus length is just going to give you a longer length, times a length is going to be length squared, which is area. Length times a length gives you an area. And then the final one, d cubed plus dwh. Well, that's length cubed, which is volume, length times length times length. And this is also length cubed. So length cubed plus length cubed just gives you another length cubed, which is volume. So as I said, if you haven't revised that, then that is going to be something that is very weird to you. So you need to go and practice that and come back. The marks for that, you would get 3 for all of them correct, 2 for 3 or 4 of them correct, 1 for 2 of them correct. Question 16. Group of 20 people visited Anglesey for a weekend break. 10 of the group visited Beaumaris Castle. 13 of the group visited South Stack Lighthouse, and 4 did not visit either of these places. So 10 visited the castle, so that whole circle there must equal 10. The lighthouse must equal 13, and 4 did not visit either. So the 4 goes out there, and what we don't know is what's on the inside there. But we do know that 10 of them visited Beaumaris. So the castle, the whole circle must add up to 10. So 10 minus x plus x is 10. And similarly, 13 visited the South Stack. So we get that. Now we know that if there are 20 people altogether and 4 didn't go to either, everything that's inside that circle must add up to 16. So we have 10 minus x plus 13 minus x must add up to 16. So that gives us 1023 minus x equals 16. So 23, take away something equals 16. What must the something be? 7. So to go back to our Venn diagram, x is 7, which means this is 10 minus 7, which is 3, and this is 13 minus 7, which is 6. One person is chosen at random for the group. What is the probability that this person visited only one of the 2 places? Well, it's going to be up to 20, because there are 20 in the group. And only visiting one will be either those 3 or those 6. If I'm using the word or in probability, I'm going to add those together. 9. So 9 out of 20. Okay, so there's 3 marks for this. 1 mark for the 4. 1 mark for the 7. That must have done both. And 1 mark for all correct, and 2 marks for the 9 out of 20. Question 17, simultaneous equations. Okay, so hopefully you've practiced these. Always a good idea to number the equations as you go. And again, it depends really how confident you are. I'll assume you're not, and that the way you've learnt these is to always multiply the top equation by the bottom number in front of the x, and the bottom one by the top number. So I'm going to do equation 1 times 2. 2 times 4y is 8y. 7 times 2 is 14. And equation 2, I'm going to multiply by 3. So I get 6x minus 9y equals 16 times 3. 16 times 3, 18, 48. Equation 3, equation 4. Then you're going to subtract them. So let's do equation 3 take away equation 4. So 6x take away 6x, gone. 8y, now you need to be careful here because we're doing 8y take away minus 9y equals 14 take away 48. So what happens is you get two negatives making a plus. So you get 17y, and then 14 take away 48. Well, if we do 48 take away 14, we get 34. So that's going to be negative 34. So y is going to be negative 34 divided by 17, which is negative 2. So y is negative 2. We then have to put that back into one of our equations, and let's choose equation 1 because it's one of the smallest numbers. So we say substitute in 1. Instead of y, I got negative 2 equals 7. 4 2s are 8. Plus times a minus, signs are different, answer is negative 7. I can undo and take 8 by adding 8. So 3x is 15. Get the x and so on, have to divide by 3. So x is 15 divided by 3, which is 5. So x is 5, y negative 2. Marks for that. 1 mark for getting them with the same x's or the same y's, depending on what you've done. 1 mark for then getting the first value. 1 mark for substituting back in to get the second value. So only 4 marks for that. Just going to push this underneath so it's something to press on. Okay, non-calculated standard form. The way that I teach this is to start off with writing the powers. So just like you've got units, tens, hundreds, thousands, units would be 10 to the 0, tens 10 to the 1, hundreds 10 to the 2, thousands 10,000s, 100,000s, etc., etc. There's your decimal point. So 5.41 times 10 to the 5 means that if it was 5 times 10 to the 5, you'd have a 5 there and then 0, 0, 0, 0. The fact that it's 5.41 means it's a bit bigger by that. And you keep those going up as far as the decimal point. So 5.41 times 10 to the 5 is that. 2.3 times 10 to the 4, well 2 times 10 to the 4 would be there. So the 0.3 would take you to there. So those are the two numbers I'm going to add. So when I add them, 0, 0, 0, 4, 6, 5. So the number is 564,000. To write that back in standard form, it's going to be 5.64 times 10 to the 5. You don't need to worry about you moving your decimal point or anything like that. You just remember that that's how the index works. 2 marks for that. 1 mark if you left it like that. 2 marks if you put it back into standard form. And then the final question, you've got to form an equation with an inequality. So Rashid owned N sheep. Ivion had exactly 4 times as many sheep as Rashid. So Rashid, N sheep, Ivion, 4 times as many. Rashid buys 17 extra sheep. So he starts off with N and then he's having 17 more. Ivion sells 8 of his sheep. So he started with 4N, he's lost 8 of them. Ivion still has more sheep than Rashid. So that is still going to be greater than that. So we would write that using that inequality symbol. Solve the inequality to find the least value of n. So this works now just as if it was an equation. So I'm going to take the n off both sides, and that, to get that on its own, I would add 8. Hang on. So 4n take 8 take n. So I've taken the n off that side. I've got to take it off there as well. So I get 3n take 8 is greater than 17. Now I'm going to add 8 to both sides. So 3n is greater than 25. So n is going to be greater than 25 divided by 3. Well, 25 divided by 3 is 8, remainder 1. Well, you can't have 8 point something of a sheep, so the fewest sheep is going to be 9. Is the least that you can have. So 2 marks for forming that equation. 1 mark for getting it down to 3n is greater than 25. 1 mark for n is greater than 25 over 3, and 1 mark for saying so you must have 9 sheep. So there you go. That is the Summer 17 Intermediate Tier Maths Paper 1.